So I feel like most people I talk to were either heading into hyperinflation and assets are going to the moon, or we're heading into the Great Depression and everything's going to collapse. And there's not a whole lot of middle ground. And I find myself very much in the middle ground. I expect markets to be higher over the next couple of years, but I don't think it's going to be a straight line, and I think it's going to be very volatile. And I don't think interest rates and inflation are coming down very much unless they crash lower. So, if there is some kind of a market event or economic event that causes markets to crash and therefore take prices and economic growth with it, then I think we could see lower inflation. But I am not expecting just a slow drip lower, from 3.5% to 1.5% inflation and a stair step lower of interest rates from, call it 4.5% to 2.5% or whatever it is. I think they pretty much stay where they're at or go higher unless they crash lower. Now, I'm not playing the crash lower. That's kind of my outlook. And I feel like the data kind of supports that. In other words, to a certain extent, we've had this Goldilocks, all summer on the inflation data. It hasn't been too hot, but it hasn't been weak either, right? But the expectation that rate cuts are coming has depressed volatility and pushed asset prices higher. But I don't see why prices are going to just slowly go down unless they crash. I can come up with a number of reasons why they would crash lower, but I just don't see it happening in the data yet. And with tariffs just now actually coming into being, I think that has the potential to at least keep them at elevated rates, even if they don't take off and go higher. And I think Powell is in no hurry to cut. And I know everybody's expecting him to cut, and I won't be surprised if he cuts, but I won't be surprised if he doesn't cut either. I think there is a lot of personalities at play here. I think the last thing in the world he wants to be is Arthur Burns. Now, that's not some great insight on my part. That's been discussed ad nauseum over the last couple of years, but I think it's right. But I will say Trump has done a masterful job. And listen, whatever you think of Trump, he is a great master of the narrative. And he has done a fantastic job of setting up Powell as the fall guy if there is a correction. If he doesn't cut and the market goes down, he says, well, stupid Powell. I've been saying all along, he got it wrong again. If it wasn't for him, markets would be higher. But if he cuts and markets go down, he says, stupid Powell, he was late. I've been telling him for 6 months he needed to cut rates. And now he's like, no matter what happens, Trump is covered. And while the Trump haters will say it's Trump's fault, the people who voted for Trump, they're going to eat it up. And the populist rhetoric of the evil Fed, Powell's hurting your 401ks and your IRAs at the same time he's building a $2.5 billion palace in Washington, D.C., that is going to sell to his base. And the ironic thing about all this is I actually think Trump would be okay with a correction. I don't think he is as against it as many people think. I know I'm not saying he wants it, but I don't think he's going to freak out if there's a 10% correction in the stock market. I don't think Besant would be all that upset with a 10% correction in the stock market. Markets don't go up straight and to the right. There are going to be corrections. And I think if there's going to be one, I think they would much rather have it now than 9 months from now or 12 months from now heading into the midterms. But that's kind of where I see the inflation expectations at right now.
What's the quote? Never let a good crisis go to waste.
Right.
Or, you got Besant out there talking about short-term rates being 1.5% to 2.5% in the future. I think that was on Fox News yesterday, which is just incredible. So they're basically putting the blame squarely on Powell if he doesn't ease.
Well, not only that, Tyler, think about all the stuff that both Trump and Besant have said over the last couple months. Is they've done a horrible job. They're behind the curve. They need a full review. We think the Fed needs a full review. And I've been talking about this for a couple of years now. I think we're moving towards a period where the functions of the Treasury and the Fed get merged. Now, whether that's official or whether it's unofficial or whether the Fed just gets less autonomy and the Treasury gets more control or more say on monetary policy, not to mention the fact that, it kind of started under Yellen, is that you could argue that Treasury has started doing monetary policy anyway. Traditionally, Treasury is in charge of dollar policy and the Fed's in charge of monetary policy. But, those lines have gotten blurred a lot over the last couple of years. And again, if there is some kind of a downturn, or if there is something that doesn't go perfectly, Trump and Bessent have both set it up to where they're not the ones at fault.